Hello, screenwriters, and welcome to Writing for Screens. Today, Ask Me Almost Anything. My name is Glenn Gers, and I come to you every Monday through Friday, if I can make it, at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Most of the time lately, I've been working on the step-by-step project when I let you look over my shoulder while I write a script, but once a week, I try to answer some of the questions that have come in during the chats or through my email. With the first question today is, do characters have to change? All right, here's the deal with this one. It's kind of an interesting situation. Last week, I was talking about something, and I was talking about characters, and I used this card and this concept that characters develop, that characters unfold or play out during the course of a story. And someone asked me, what about characters who don't change? Like, for instance, James Bond, Hercule Poirot, Columbo, who every time they show up, they are the same person. And I got all into the weeds about James Bond, because there's a debate on whether James Bond changes, depending on which James Bond you get. Anyway, I therefore more or less said, no, all these characters do change. And that's actually not true. Some characters don't change, and I really wanted to address that because it's a really valuable thing to consider. Hi, Matthew. Here's the deal. Sometimes a character doesn't change, but when that happens, something still has to change. Now, definitely, when you get a detective story, for instance, what's going to change is somebody's bringing them a problem and they are using their skills and magic to solve it. So something is going to change. They are coming up against, in theory, a new and interesting puzzle each time. But the point about this is every story has something that changes. James Bond changes into his dinner suit, which is true, although sometimes he just pulls off his wetsuit and is already wearing the dinner suit. Basically, I'm working up a character video, like a video lesson that's going to join the others. That's a really big one, so it's taking a while. So I'm just going to sort of give you a preview now of this. The first thing that happens is if a character doesn't change, one thing that can happen during the course of a story is this unchanging character changes another character. Often their refusal to change provokes the character to act to change. Sometimes their unchanging nature is part of them teaching the other character. So basically what we're looking at here is a character does not have to change. Sometimes a character's world is changing or has changed and they are unchanging. So that's going to be the story, is how do they deal with a world that's not the world they came from. Likewise, sometimes even in this world, an unchanging character can change the world. You get somebody who's strong and determined, and they are going to change the world, and they may not necessarily change during that. Hello, Anto. Very nice to see you here for our first time with Anto. Another thing that can happen is an unchanging character can begin a story by trying to change or being asked to change, to give up their ways or whatever, only to be required by some new need or obstacle that comes up to recover their original values. The point is there are many ways that you can have a story where you're dealing with a character who does not change. That is completely legitimate. A lot of screenwriting teachers are like, every character must change, especially your hero must change. That's actually just not so. But when you are telling, because the expectations of character change are so ground into us by a formula, a Hollywood formula, frankly, one of the things you need to do when you're telling the story of an unchanging character is to make clear for the audience the expectation of the type of story you are telling, to make clear that you're going to know that you're going to be watching a story about an unchanging character. What you want to do is make sure that we know what to want and what to fear. This is really true in any story. You're definitely trying to figure out what the character wants, so what the character fears, what their obstacles are. But it's also good to sort of think about how are you tipping the audience off as to what they should be hoping for or fearing. Very often it's the same as the character, but not always. Sometimes what the character wants is what we fear. Thank you, Natasha. How are you? And Javier, happy Friday to you. So what we're discussing here is, does a character have to change? And I've been talking about some examples of story structures where the main character, or any character, sometimes it's a side character, doesn't change. And still it's a completely satisfying story. One of the ways you can do this is you can make us want the character to stay the same. You make their unchanging quality admirable. And then you create a painful consequence if they give up this quality of theirs. For instance, in Ted Lasso, we don't want Ted to change, although we do want Ted to deal with some things that he's clearly hiding or burying from himself. But the important thing is, when you've got an unchanging character, you want to lead the audience to feel strongly about their unchanging nature. You can make us fear that the character will change. You create a powerful, believable pressure on them, and you're just thinking, uh-oh, are they going to break? Is their heroism not going to stand up to this challenge? Yes, absolutely. This is a very, very sharp analysis. In Shawshank, Andy doesn't change. Andy is like, he's got his mission. He's going to figure it out. His character is going to pull through these increasingly horrible things, and really terrible challenges. And absolutely right. Red starts cynical, hopeless, and he becomes hopeful. That's actually the story. It's, in many ways, it's Red's story. So very, very good. The thing that the danger of an unchanging character is that they can seem predictable or invulnerable, and that's a real problem. And that is the danger of the detective genre. What happens with the detective genre, or anything like that, where you have a character, especially in a series or a franchise where somebody's coming back and being the same person all the time, is that they're not going to die. They're not going to fail. James Bond is not going to fail to solve the problem. Poirot is not going to not solve the mystery. So then partly you have the problem of having to keep escalating the stakes, which is, making a harder and harder puzzle. That's dangerous, because you can get yourself to the point where it's like, I can't think of something smart enough to scare Poirot or to challenge Poirot. But that is one good way, if you have a character who's unchanging, is to give them a new extraordinary challenge. You've got somebody who's just like, okay, they're the toughest person in the world, but now the greatest, monster in the world is up against them. Marvel runs into this problem a lot too. They handle it by making the characters change. Sometimes there's a price to pay. In other words, they are going to go through their mission. It can be the story of somebody who's changing the world, who's changing social conditions or something. But there's going to be a price, a sacrifice, a painful choice, something that they're going to have to pay in order to do this thing. And another story structure that you can use with an unchanging character is people don't believe in them. So they know that they are not going to give up, but it's really the story of how they have to win others over to their values or to trusting them. Yes, character in general is often linked to theme, I think, and how the plot unfolds. Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. Hi, Jean. I got a question that you inspired coming up in a little while. Hello, this is Kitschy. One final warning about unchanging characters. While their essential nature may be unchanging, they can't just do the same thing over and over. If you've got a story where somebody is just taking the same action, solving puzzles or beating bad guys just over and over, that's gonna be boring. And one other note, it doesn't come up that often for most of us, but if you are working for someone as a writer for hire and they believe in the rule that the character change, then that certainly is the rule for that project and for working for them. So, you can try and explain to them that that's not so, but it's their project. So therefore, you got to obey the rules when you are working for hire. So those are my thoughts about does a character have to change? If we dismiss characters who do not change, such as Sherlock Holmes, Columbo, or James Bond, what I do is separate worldview from core essence. I'm not sure I know the difference or understand the difference, but I'm not dismissing them. That's the whole point of this. I am not dismissing them. I'm saying you can structure a perfectly great story around a character who does not change. That's okay. What you just then have to do is have something else in the story change. If you have a situation that's unchanging and characters are unchanging, that is going to be slow going for the audience. But I am definitely not dismissing those characters. What I'm saying is you need to reconceive the rules. And really what this gets down to is there's a rule that I am saying just doesn't apply. It can be used. The rule that a character must change can be used, but it doesn't have to be used. As with all rules, and I think I actually have a little thing here. Here it is. Rules are tools. They're things you can use or not use, depending on the situation, depending on your desires and needs. The rules of script writing are very, very few that you have to use. You do have to use script writing format. You do, if you want to sell to a person who believes in a certain rule, follow that rule. But there's no screenwriting god that is going to strike you down if you don't obey the rule. Characters have to change. And that was my point. I think it's good to show a worldview change as a strong part of the story. That is a way to do it. There are many, many possible structures. My point is that I believe that the better writer you are, the more you can look at lots of different examples. And the more stories you know, the more you can sort of go through your file cards of possible stories and say, oh, well, in this story, the character did not change. In this story, they did. And when they did that, how did they do that? That's really what I try to teach is very, very few absolute rules, very many tools and skills and processes that you can use. Tools, skills, process. That's what I suggest you try and work on. If what you're seeing in the frame shows no change, you're not. It's surveillance. Actually, even if it's surveillance, things will change. But I was talking about writing, not shooting. But yes, that's absolutely true. If what you're seeing in the frame shows no change, you're watching a still. You're watching a photograph. All right, let's go on to question number 2. Hold on. Two of my favorite films are Ghostbusters and Back to the Future. The character from these. I would not say that is true. I believe that some of those characters do change. Oh, by the way, that's the other thing. I'm not talking about just main characters. I'm saying all characters. However, I think Marty changes. I think Marty gains an appreciation for his family and his home, which he did not have at the beginning. And Ghostbusters, I think that Bill Murray's character gains... I'm trying to remember. Actually, there's so much in Ghostbusters I don't remember. But my sense was that they did change somewhat. But in Ghostbusters, I might give it to you. All right. Anyway, let's talk about my next question, which is E2 wrote this question. Allow me to read it to you. How many hours or pages do you set yourself for when writing? Or do you even have a goal? So here's the deal. I personally don't set hours or pages because it just stresses me out too much. Different days are different. Different projects are different. Different problems you have to solve. As you've watched during the step-by-step sessions, sometimes I'll spend 2 or 3 days trying to solve one question. Other times I'll be just ripping through the outline, and it's always different. So I don't like to set pages. Also, because a lot of the time you're not doing pages, you're doing thinking. And the actual page, and when I'm churning through the rough draft, even then, on the rough draft, you saw that some days just did a little bit, some days I did a lot. It's, for me, it felt like an artificial pressure. If I have a job, if I have like, okay, you have to hand in this 50-page script on a week from tomorrow, then I know I've got to get a certain amount of pages done every day. So that's different because that's an artificial deadline. How much do I set myself? I set myself the requirement to get something done every day. That's it, all I done. Now, partly this is because there were times, months of my life, years of my life, when I could not get anything done, where I was panicking, where I was going off on bad, useless tracks. So even if I was spending hours at the desk, I was not getting anything done, in the sense that whatever I was doing was garbage. And that's also the important thing. Sitting at your desk or your computer or your notebook or whatever it is for a certain amount of time and not getting anything done is not productive. It would be better, as for me, it was better to say, if I get my work done in 15 minutes, then I do. And I'm allowed to stop. I'm allowed to go do other things that I like. I'll probably end up wanting to do more. However, I don't want to say anything more than, if I can get something done every day, that's cool. And every day is different. Every day, every project, every page of every project is different. I'm just going to take a minute to catch up. Hi, Brian and Aaron. And I write. And yes, this is true. When there is no character change, it can be a tragedy. Like There Will Be Blood. I would say that is absolutely true. So what we're talking about right now is setting yourself, getting things done. I'm currently going through the spiral of not getting anything done, but I'm reminding myself of why I love writing. That is legit. That is not bad. The fun and creative creating and freedom of imagining is fun. That is right. And here's the deal about that, because I have talked often about the years when I was struggling. And you have to understand, when I was struggling to write, I was committing full time every day to the theoretical getting something done. That's actually too much pressure. That's too much to say, I am not going to do anything else. It's better to say, I am going to make sure I eat healthy meals and I exercise and I sleep and I take care of my relationships and I keep my house clean, as well as writing. Those things count towards getting something done, because if you don't do those things, no amount of writing is going to save you. So I just advise that you put this in perspective of life, making a sustainable life. So here's how I work this. I do one thing at a time. I handle all work and all things in life as small pieces. Think workable size tasks. And then I do the one that I'm putting right in front of me, and I do that one. That relieves me of the pressure, which always happens when I start to plan this one and this one and this one. And 5 years from now, I'll be making Citizen Kane. That never works. And you end up, if you just work on the one in front of you and the choice after that, you'll keep getting, if I did some writing and then I'm like, I'd better do the laundry. Cool. And then go back and write another bit. However much that is. Sometimes it's pages, sometimes it's lines. It doesn't matter. What matters is if I keep doing that, particularly because I personally, I get really antsy. I get really anxious if I'm not doing something. And the more, now the doing something can include reading, relaxing, watching a movie. Those are things that I'm doing them. The hardest thing, therefore, is to do something that I won't regret later. Doing something that I think, well, that was worth doing. So just making that choice on a day like right now, it is worth getting the laundry done instead of watching a movie. Cool. So this is basically my plan. Sit down and do a thing. One small thing and get it done. And then if I can do more of those things, cool. If not, do something else. But just keep doing one thing at a time. That is the only way I found to manage the out of control hugeness of writing. Yesterday I wrote 4 pages. Today I spent 5 hours just trying to solve a story problem on a particular page. This is writing. This is exactly, Matthew is telling us exactly why I don't believe in spending time or pages, because this can happen. Okay. Brian says, I tend to do deep dives that are hard to break away from and attend to other things. That everybody's different. Everyone's built different. I'm built so that with most things, I get antsy and I have a little bit of some form of ADD, I think. Hello, Kirby. I got one of your questions here too. Favorite thing about writing a story. I'm going to put that as a... I'm going to get to this in a bit. Yes, doing something, that sounds crazy, but doing something is good for your mental health. Yeah, that's why just, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling depressed or you're feeling low, like it's low self-esteem, doing something is generally my and I'm not saying this like it's easy. Sometimes putting on your clothes and getting out of bed is an enormous effort. And if that is true, then give yourself the credit for that and say, okay, I did that. Cool. What other thing can I do? Maybe a little bite to eat would be a good idea. That's really the best thing that I can think of. That way also, if I just do one little bit of writing and that's all I get done, at least the next day I can say, well, I got some yesterday, I can do some today, and I'll do some more tomorrow. And that tends to build your strength. It's like anything, I believe, it's cumulative, and you can get stronger and faster at all those things if you keep doing it bit by bit. Here we go. This sports music, I would say there's going to be days when things don't go, muscles are sore, lack of inspiration, but they will help you get to the good days. Yes, I agree. Yes, and right, doing one thing at a time, which is hard in our multitasking world. And honestly, like sometimes if I'm writing, I'll have music playing or something. I won't have like a podcast. I won't be watching a movie because for me, the music is actually a way to keep time from jamming up. The music sort of keeps time and sets a mood. But I can't listen to music I haven't listened to before. I got to listen to music I'm familiar with. There are days I don't want to practice scales or arpeggios on guitar, but the long-term goal, yes. And give yourself a break. So take a break now and then. That's okay. Welcome, Maritolitoso. Okay, so let us get to the next of my questions here, which is, and this is from Kirby, any advice on writing transitions? And I do have some advice on that. So let's talk about it. The exact question was, got any good advice on doing transitions? I can't keep starting with establishing shots. Fair, not a bad thing. So let's first of all talk about transitions, what they are. And actually, I think I'm going to just open up a script so as to show you. Hang on, sorry, I did not think about this, but this is what I got to do. All right, I'm going to open up here. Okay. So here's a script, right? And at the end of a scene, you can do, in the formatting, there is a thing called transition. And that is all caps. It would be fade in, fade out. These are some possible transitions. And so that's a transition in the script format. The idea is it's over to that side, and it's in all caps, and it's sort of like a scene line, but it's itself. That technically is a transition in a script. And those you should use very, very sparingly. There are very few situations when you should be doing that, because it's honestly not your job. That is an editing and directing and editing decision. They will figure out rhythmically and stylistically what transition they want to use. So I would say basically the only time you would want to do that is if you're trying to set in the reader's mind a sense of a distinctive and filmic ending to a scene or sequence. You could do fade out to sort of say this is we're actually calling attention to the end of this thing. A dissolve almost always suggests a comparison or a blending. A transition with a dissolve is sort of saying time is changing, or there is a connection between these two things. So you, other than fades and dissolves, you very, very rarely want to put the editing transition. But you do want to think about that transition. And I would say the first thing you want to do this is think in scenes. The way to think about the transition is to think about what's in each of the two scenes that you are putting next to each other, and think about what you want to get into and out of those scenes, like how you want to get out of the scene you're leaving and how you want to get into it. Not in terms of what mechanics will do it, but in terms of where the audience's mind is. For instance, what is happening in each scene? What's it about? And what do you need the audience to know? So for example, the reason that we do establishing shots is to suggest we're in a new place where a new thing is happening. And so therefore they'll sort of the outside of a restaurant, people are eating in a restaurant. That's not really necessary. There's other ways to establish for the audience to know it's a restaurant. You could start with somebody carrying a plate of food. They're dropping it at the table. There it is. There's many ways to give the mental information, because if you just simply cut from one place to another, sometimes there will be a jolt of like, I don't know where I am. So think about what is it that you are trying to get the audience to know about the place you are going to. And that's a good way to try and find transitions. Another thing that you can do is think about, is there a particular image or action or line of dialogue that you want to start a scene on or end on? That is another form of transition, to say, okay, when somebody, if you cut to two people in an office and one of them says, I know your secret, or it's time to talk about the wedding plans. That's the transition where you're getting into the action that you want to. And there could be a line. It could be, have you thought about the bubble bath or whatever it was that's part of the wedding plans? And once you start to think about that, you think, well, is there a less blunt way to do that? Is there a more character-oriented way to do that? So if you can think of a line of dialogue or an action that will establish the new scene, that's great. If there's an image, a church window with the light coming in on it, you can do that. The important thing about all of these is that you want to imply the transition. You want to not actually say, we cut to. You want to simply say, the light comes in from the church window and falls on your main character sleeping in the pews. Whatever it is that's going to be the point of that scene, you want to imply the close-up on the window or the wide shot of the light coming down. You want to steer the reader's mind with your words, with your language, with how you tell them what's going on. Then you don't have to say, we're doing a traveling shot, or we're doing a wide shot, or an establishing shot. If you say, you know, Joe and Hilda are at the restaurant eating, we will find a restaurant, you know, the director will find the restaurant transition. What you're trying to do is steer the reader. You don't need to think about how they're shooting it. You need to steer the reader's mind by implying the thing that we are supposed to be learning or focusing on or getting involved in. Okay, let me go back and see. Yes, just to go back for a second, Kitchi is saying writing is no different, no matter how much people might think it is, from things that require practice and discipline and a certain sense of step-by-stepness, and that's true. Matthew doesn't use transitions, meaning typed script transitions, and cool. Most of the time you don't need to. Hold on. Okay, so do you still use transitions for your own rhythm in your writing? I think that for me, I can help because of the style I'm building. No. I mean, I still wouldn't use it. Like, if you're going to, the one thing I just beg you not to do is to say cut to. If you take the time to take, that's like 3 or 4 lines of space in your script that you are putting cut to over on the side. There's no reason to do that because there's really almost no other way to get from shot to shot and scene to scene. They're going to cut. That's basically it. If for some reason they don't cut, that's kind of unusual, and that might be something you describe. But honestly, like if you're following a character from one place to the other, but truthfully, that's not your decision. The director and the editor will make those choices. You try and keep the reader in the reality of the moment. If someone has to go from room to room, talk about that. Don't tell us about how we're going to shoot it. Giving information related to the scene that is simple and grounded in the setting, essentially. Yes, exactly. Not so much the setting as the setting, but of course, but also the action. You could just start with Joe is counting money at the table. That's an absolutely great first line for a scene. We will now, you know, if it says like criminal hideout, interior, criminal hideout, night. Joe is counting money at the table. That's what we want. We want to, now maybe it'll start with a close-up of money. That's not your problem. The point is that you want to get people into the story. And what's most important is that Joe is counting the money at that moment. Someone's going to come in and say, hey, we need to give some of the money to the boss. Cool. Then start Joe's. You don't have to say it's the hideout, it's night. I mean, unless you've never been to the hideout before and you want to describe it. But sometimes it's better to say the room around him is cluttered and dark after you said he's counting money at the table. You don't need to, there's no formal requirement to set the stage first. That's from stage plays. Introductory shots are often related to the main conflict of the info. Depending on the, I'm not sure what you mean by introductory shots. If you mean the shot introducing a scene, that's just a cool stylistic thing they do, and it's nice. If you mean the little title card things that they do, that's another nice stylistic thing. You don't write that. I mean, they might write it because they're actually making a show. But if you're writing a script, you try not to write shots. Try to write things that are happening. And in doing that, you will imply, you'll open up the reader's mind and the director's mind to possible things to shoot. But the main thing is keep our attention on what matters emotionally and narratively. That's what matters. The important thing I'm trying to get to is you do not need to stop to describe. Don't stop to describe. Describe as things flow when you need them. Sometimes you want to stop to describe because you're entering a new place and you want the audience to get accustomed to it. That's cool. That's a reason to stop narratively, to say, new place, weird, we have feelings about this, cool. That's a reason to stop and do a scene description. Otherwise, start with some person or thing that's happening and then fold in the descriptions as needed. Yes, linking the closing and opening images can be effective. You don't want to over direct in your writing, but it can be cool. If somebody, famously, I've talked about in the movie In Cold Blood, there's a great transition where one character is leaving a room and they turn off the lights, and another one, they turn the cuts and somebody else is turning on the lights, and there's this boom boom feeling that's really cool. I don't actually think that's in the script. Okay, although the director did write it, so you never know. The implication of information shown keeps consistent with the narrative of the story. That is exactly right. Thank you, Anthony. All right. It's cool. That's a bomb shirt. Yes, it is. Thank you. It's not comfortable. I got to tell you, it's not. It's kind of scratchy and polyestery, but it's so fun that now and then I wear it for this hour, and then I frankly take it right off after the live stream. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello, Wolf. Martloso, so I'm going to go back to your questions in a minute. Okay. Right now, I'm going to go to my next question, which is from Jean. How do you stop people from stealing your script? I hear this one a lot. And I think it's an interesting question. So let's talk a little bit about it. Now, and this is what I think is interesting, the actual original question was, there was a discussion of how do you protect your script from being stolen. And Jean, who I believe said she was a lawyer, she said, can your screenplay be stolen? And I think, I'm not sure if you were getting at this, but it brought to mind for me a really great question, which is, what do you mean stolen? How can your script be stolen? And if you meant that, Jean, good on you, and let me know. Here's the question. What do you mean by script being stolen? Do you think somebody's going to take your script, take your name off it, and put their name on it? That is extremely unlikely and very easy to fix. If you have done the things I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, you're fine. If they do that, you will have proof, legal proof, that you have wrote the script before they did that, and you'll be fine. You'll take them to court if you need to, or call their office and say, "Hey, that's my script." That doesn't happen much. I almost never have heard of that ever happening. That someone took someone else's script and put their name on it and said, "I wrote this." That's pretty nutso. Frankly, if that happens, be cautious about how you confront that person, because that person must be nuts. So the real question of stealing becomes somebody took your ideas and made their own script with them. And this is where it gets complicated, because you cannot own an idea. You can only own the concrete expression of the idea, as in a script. If you think I'm going to write a thing and it's got this really cool plot twist, I own that. You don't. It would be very, very difficult to find a plot twist that has no antecedents in other work, especially now. The feed of culture has risen enormously. Like for the first, honestly, when John Milton wrote Paradise Lost, it was possible for someone in Western culture to have read every important book there was. You could have a library and basically know everything you needed to know. That was, however, 300 or 400 years ago. Since then, the pace of stuff coming out has increased enormously, and there is no way to know all of the stories and all of the plot twists. But what I do know is there's a guy named Samuel Rosenberg wrote a book called Naked is the Best Disguise. This book was an investigation into the themes and literary precedents of Sherlock Holmes. The guy who wrote it was a lawyer for MGM. He's a lawyer for the movie studios in the department of researching claims of owning ideas. And what he would do is somebody would say, hey, that was my idea. And he would go back to literature and he would look at the literary classics and he'd say, well, that idea kind of shows up here. That was his job, which I think is an amazing job. Can you imagine what a cool job that is? So, somebody says, oh, it turns out that Darth Vader is his father. And he goes back and he says, well, look at all these classic works and all these previously published works where somebody didn't realize that their enemy was their father. There's a bunch of them. Therefore, that idea was existing in the culture before you wrote your version of it. Oh, by the way, sorry for the spoiler if any of you have not watched Star Wars. So the main thing that you can't do is own an idea. You can't own a story. You can only own the expression of it, which is why the most important thing that you can do is write it. If you have a written version of the story and their version copies from your specific writing, then maybe they stole it. And certainly that is a potential issue to bring up with lawyers. If you want to get into lawyers, I would, no offense, Gene, suggest maybe don't do that. Lawyers and legal action can become very expensive and very complicated very quickly. But the main thing you want to do, if you have something in your head or if you've got something, write it down, okay? And then you want to copyright it or register it. Here is the deal. The U.S. Copyright Office and the Writers Guild of America, and I put links in the description of this video where you can click on them and go right to their websites for a fee. Writers Guild is a smaller fee, but it's less legally effective. Copyright is a larger fee with a longer paperwork, but it's super useful. Those are the ways that you protect the work you have written. But until you write it, you can't do it, because part of that process of registering is they're going to say, click here and give us the PDF of the work. And if you don't have the work done, you can't copyright it. So, hi, Jane. Thanks. So this is the most important thing is do your work, do your version of your idea, because if there's something really distinctive in it and you write it down and you copy it, then if someone was to steal it, and we have to still discuss what you think that means, then you could, in theory, object legally. The other thing is keep your paper trail. Like if you send something to someone, keep a record of that. Keep a copy of the email where you sent it. If you send it by paper, well, I don't think people even want paper anymore, but if you did, keep a copy of the cover letter. Whatever it is, keep records of what you do. That is very valuable. If somebody sends you an email and says, sorry, we didn't like this script, we're not using it, and then later on you see that they've made it, that email where they say they weren't using it is a valuable thing to have. So here's the problem with all of this. People don't generally do that. They honestly don't. They're not, it's a dumb way to do business. And they're not that interested. Like, they're in the business of hiring writers. If they liked your script, they would just try to hire you or buy it. They would not steal it. If they're in the legitimate industry, mostly they are not going to be in the stealing business because it's bad for business. If someone gets outed as having stolen something, it makes people less willing to work with them. And just in general, that's just not how those businesses, they're advised by their lawyers who say, just pay the damn fee and buy the thing, don't steal it. So therefore, stealing really doesn't happen in the Hollywood industry. If you are dealing with wannabe producers, people who have not got a lot of experience, who are maybe just starting out or who have worked around the fringes of the business, if you're talking about some genre people who are kind of hustlers, yeah, they might steal it. They'd be stupid, but people can be stupid. And in that case, yes, copyright it and stuff. But the issue with having stolen your script becomes, what's the value of that? More often, coincidence does happen. Seriously. More than one person will think of the same idea, especially if you're talking about like, oh, it's a world where all the water has gone. You know, that's not original. A lot of people are going to be working on it. Oh, it's a detective, but it's a nun. I promise you, other people have thought of that and are working on that. It's only theft if they saw your work. Okay? Like, it's one of the big reasons that companies do not really want to read scripts from people outside of the business, because they don't want to find out that they see it, and then it turns out that they're already working on something like that, or later they see a better version of that. So they will give you a release and say, if you give this to us and we're working on something else, no stealing. So, seriously, most of the time, at very best, it's just a coincidence. It has happened to me that something I have written, which was very, very distinctive, was, I know, shown to some people who were doing a TV series, and they used a version of that scene. It was just a scene in their show. And there was no way that that idea had not been influential. But it's just an idea. Their version of it was very different than mine. They thought, oh, that is an interesting thing. You know, is that copying? Nah, it's an idea. You can't copyright an idea. I did not call them up and say, hey, that was my idea. Because it happens. The main thing that you want to deal with this whole stealing thing is, why do you think they would steal it? The reason that people steal stuff mostly is because it has financial value. If the thing they steal does not become a big hit, then you really don't have any claim to anything. What are you going to do? Take it back? Get your name put on it? Unless they actually stole your script, there's nothing to gain from worrying about this. You could sue if they actually saw your work and you actually have like line by line like steals. Sure. However, and I see people in the chat are talking about this, I just need to really push this. It's more important that people read your work than that you control its fate. You can't control its fate. Every time that you're thinking about, oh, if they read this and then they do that, you're talking about things outside of your control. Yes, if it's copyrighted, they're not going to steal it. If you are holding back stuff, I don't want to show it to anyone because they might steal it. You're a writer. You want people to read your work. That's the game. You give it to everybody you can. Keep a record and you're gold. You want people to read your work. You don't want to make them self-conscious about whether or not they're going to steal your work. Just let them read it. Okay, copyright it and let them read it. Okay, let's talk about all the cases. A studio doesn't want a legal wrangle on this. There have been some. They could become notorious. And basically, once again, there is case, and honestly, what often happens, this happens famously in music. Somebody will hear a melody. 5 years later, they will write down that melody. It will sound really good. And they'll say, I invented this. It happens all the time. People absorb things and then they use them without realizing it. It's not a crime. It's only a crime if it becomes the Terminator. Coming to America, right. And once again, famously, that was an enormous case where they had proof that he had, like, what happens is sometimes somebody will send something in and somebody will like it and then they will reject it for whatever reason. And like 6 months later, they honestly will have more or less forgotten or think, well, this is kind of a good idea, but I don't want to do his version of it. And they'll tell someone else that idea. And they'll think that idea is not that close. Now and then you'll get some sleazy moron who, says, oh, do that and steal it. Honestly, it's not really going to happen. It's not your big problem. Yes, everything is a remix. So that is a biggie. Let's do the last question. No, no, I'm gonna do a couple that have come up here. First of all, Aaron asked me, what? What's your favorite thing about writing a story? Honestly, writing the story. I mean, there's so many. I like, at this point, every part of it is fun for me. It has, and this took. Remember, I have been doing this for 50 years. I started when I was like 11 years old. The more you practice it, which is what I talk about often, the more that you begin to like all the different parts of it. I actually enjoy the whole process. That is why I'm doing it while people can watch, because I trust that it's going to be fun for me. When I do those live things, the thing I don't worry about is, will I enjoy the writing part? That's always fun. It's like doing puzzles for people who like puzzles. You know, it's like you put a puzzle in front of them, yeah, I'm going to start playing with this puzzle. I like writing. So I am weird about that, but also that helps. The more that you find things to like, and I'm a big one for find things to like. Find things to like in things you watch. Find things to like in what other people do. Find things to like in things that people do badly. If you have some friend and they're a terrible writer, find what's good in it, because there will be something good. It's better for you when you are thinking, what's fun? What's good? What's a thing I can like? It's a really, really valuable trait for a writer. Martela Toso says, references. I want to reference another, but it doesn't appear. For instance, using. Okay, that's tricky because you don't. If you're doing an homage, This is a clear question. It's an interesting question. Usually, you want someone to make reference to it within the dialogue. Like somebody says that, and somebody else says, "Isn't that from RoboCop?" And it's, yeah, but whatever. You know, and if you're actually got a RoboCop saying it, don't do that. But if it's somebody who's like, you know, let's go to the bar. No, I don't want to. Dead or alive, you're coming with me. Isn't that from RoboCop? You take care of it. If you've got a character who's sort of quotey, and they can say, as RoboCop said, blah, 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 blah. But that's a certain type of personality. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. There's a... okay. I always forget to turn off that phone. So the main way I would say is, if possible, put some form of recognition of the reference in there. If you're actually using a line. If you're just kind of, or, you know, sometimes it's just a look, but also if it's just one line, honestly, you're not going to get in legal trouble for taking one line. So I wouldn't worry too much about legal problems for quoting a line, especially something famous like "Tomorrow is Another Day." I would say the main thing is, if you want the reference to be known, you have to assume that the audience doesn't know it. The people who do know it, cool. But and if you watch a lot of comedies do this, and you get a flavor for it. So watch stuff and keep your eyes open for how people handle it. But the way that they usually handle it is somehow within the scene, someone will bring up the fact that it is a quote. But sometimes you just quote stuff and you quote it. The people who get it, get it. The people who don't. That's okay. That's not the end of the world. As long as it's not a major plot point that people who don't know, and this often comes up with any kind of relatively obscure knowledge. You know, if there's knowledge that you think a good portion of the audience may not know, and as much as you might love a certain movie, I promise you a good portion of the audience does not know it, then it's worth folding that into the scene. Does that help? Good. Okay. Writing is a lot like solving a puzzle. That is true. I will forgive you, Power Mad. And I like the organization of all the bins in the background too. It took me a long time to get to the point where I could organize myself that way. Okay, last question, because I'm gonna be signing off soon. But and I can't remember who asked this. What are your thoughts on fan? Oh, it was Larry. Larry TFWXX said, "What are your general thoughts on fan fiction?" And I like that question because it's something that you have to understand. When I was growing up, when I was starting as a writer, it didn't exist. There was no such thing as fan fiction. And I like that it exists. I think it's really cool. First of all, we all start out, every writer in the world starts out loving some piece of writing and kind of wanting to write that. That's how we all start. And so I would say the fact that there is now a place to do it where other people can share in that, that's brilliant. That's great. I think that the existence of fan fiction is a beautiful thing. I think anyone who writes something who gets fan fictionized would get a kick out of it, I would think. So the basic question then is just, why not? Absolutely, do it. Cool, great. But why not does have some practical issues. First of all, you cannot profit off it. If you are intending to monetize it in any way, if you are intending to turn professional, you can't because you don't own it. Now, Maria Espino, one of our regulars here, has frequently talked about the fact that certain owners of copyrighted material will endorse or allow fan fiction. Star Wars particularly apparently has like rules. You can do this with it, but not that with it. Neat. That's great. What I would say is I'm not a big fan of thinking in terms of your work being like, can I sell this? But if you are thinking about selling it, if you are thinking about, I want to show this to someone as a sample of my professional work, fan fiction is not useful. They're going to mostly say, I need to see your voice, your vision, your style. You gotta be you, and we gotta see your creativity. So that's the one caveat. That's the one downside I would say to fan fiction is you're putting yourself into the non-professional category, which is good as far as I'm concerned. Do it. I think of it a bit like training wheels. And Maria Espino has done that. She wrote some scripts in the world of Star Wars, partly because she said, I want to practice writing scripts. And that's a good thing to practice on. You've got a lot of things already set up for you, built in. Characters and themes and worlds are there to be used your way. That's neat. That's a good thing. As long as you recognize it as practice to be shared only with other fans, go do it. The other thing is civilians, non-artists, they're going to give you less credit, and some professional artists, and honestly, this is a problem with professional artists. A lot of them are just very competitive and very judgmental because they live in this fearful world of, am I going to make more and am I going to keep my position? But generally, civilian, if you tell your uncle at Thanksgiving, I wrote a fan fiction script, you're going to say, that's not real. The fact that the real work was real doesn't matter to them because civilians don't understand what art is. So what I would say is that if you're going to do it for the community, do it for the creativity, do it for the fun of it, and for the fact that you are engaging in a created world that you enjoy playing in and that your imagination can't help working in. Cool. I would also urge you to consider what your version of that thing would be. What would your space epic? What would your detective story? What would your sexy vampire thing be? And how would you make it different enough and yours enough? That's that extra artistic edge that I think is really makes creativity exciting. So I personally would always push for that because that's where an artist, you own it in a cool way. And I like that. Okay. So Another word for fan fiction is pastiche. This is a fact. And yes, if it's in the public domain, I don't even think it counts as fan fiction then. Then it becomes adaptation. Then it becomes reworking or whatever. I mean, famously, Shakespeare's stories very often were reworked from other sources. Harry Potter fiction, fan fiction. Yeah, exactly. It's really cool. It encourages you to write more, and it's just fun. It's just good. Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna go out on this. Harry Potter. Yeah. Wow, I feel really old right now. Yes. Don't we all? So all of you, fan fiction, you want to do it, do it. Fear of having your work stolen, copyright it, keep your paper trail, and don't worry about it. Don't give it another thought. It's not going to happen. It's not important. So those are my advices for today. And this brings us to the end of the hour. And thusly, I am going to say to you, have a great weekend. I believe, wait, let me just quickly check. Am I going to be here Monday? I am going to be here Monday. What do you know? I'll see you all Monday. Okay, go write something.